CAUltra.
Goes huge for Ultra, and they get their first home series victory.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of CAUltra. We are back after a long hiatus. We've got some stuff in the works here that we're excited to announce, hopefully in the next coming weeks. But until then, there's some news to talk about, and that is, of course, that the CDL is starting. So, what kind of CDL podcast, Call of Duty podcast? Yeah, exactly. What kind of Call of Duty podcast would we be if we didn't do our power rankings? So they actually start, Thursday, which actually should be the day that this video is released. So we might as well get our, predictions out there. Therefore, we can get even more hate than we've been getting previously, and everybody can tell us how wrong we are, only for us one day to be ideally proven correct. But time will tell.
Ideally.
We will see. Ideally. And with that
A
out
little
of the
bit
way,
of spice right there.
a little bit of spice, but we'll see. Well, it depends. With that out of the way, let's just jump right into this. I'm one of your hosts, Spencer. With me, as always, is Chris. And Chris, how's it going?
Pretty good. You know what? We're a Toronto Ultra podcast, guys, so we'll be focusing a little bit more on them during this power rankings. But guys, if you like what you see, please do us a favor and put a like in that penny box, or in the piggy bank, piggy bank, to help us out and buy an algorithm or two on YouTube.
Yeah, we need help with the algorithm, okay? We need all the help that we can get there. So, guys, if you like it, comment. Please tell us what you agree with, what you don't agree with. This should be an interesting one because I think we got some interesting takes here, but nothing too surprising. So we're going to try to do maybe like a little bit of a tier list, but more or less just sort of go through from 12 to 1. I think that's just a little bit more fun. But let's start at the bottom tier, and that is a 12th place team, and that is LAG for our combined list. Both Chris and I had them as sort of the 12th place team. Now, this is nothing against the LAG. I want to make that very clear before we start this entire thing that somebody's got to be 12, right? With only 12 teams, with only 4 players per team, there's not a bad team in this list. You know what I mean? I don't think there was a very clear bad team amongst these sort of teams. I think some people thought that Paris might be one of them until Paris put the roster, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's actually not that bad."
Maybe let's kind of present it as a just the tier. Let's present it the tier and just give the 3 teams or 4 teams.
Because we might as well go. We do have the combined list, but I agree. It's one of those things where somebody's got to be in the bottom tier, somebody's got to be 12th, and that's LAG. If this ends up going to LAM, which there's rumors circulating that it will be. There's no doubt in my mind that, for instance, a team like LAG can potentially go on another run like they did in World War II, where they ended up winning the entire thing and surprise a lot of people. But I just think with the way the current roster is constructed and sort of the lack of firepower, they got some interesting names, especially in the bench. A guy like Mental, you really want to see succeed, even though that academy team's struggling a little bit. I like the players here. I think they got talent. I just think that they lack some of the firepower that maybe some of the other teams sort of have. And again, through the grapevine, through how scrims have been going, I personally am at my 12. I know they beat Seattle in the Seattle Showdown, and that's maybe your one caveat is how can you have us last when we've just won? But I also don't want to put too much weight into a preseason game that didn't really count for any CDL points. So I think if there's a major, I still think potentially Seattle could come out above them, but that's why I do have LAG in that 12th sort of position in that bottom tier.
Yeah, I couldn't add any more there. You know what? Mental is that person who is a little bit of a wild card at the moment.
Yeah, and he's been okay, but he hasn't been lighting the world on fire.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be just the fact that he's literally been in this for about a couple months.
Definitely give him time. He still can turn into something. Don't get me wrong. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that definitely will bump them a little higher, but at that point, yeah, we have them. What's up next on the list then?
Seattle. Seattle Surge. This was again a team that you got a lot of hate for earlier on in the year when everybody was putting Nameless in his videos, top 4. A lot of people had this team in that top 4, top 5 conversation, and we sort of said, okay, slow down a second here. Maybe not as good as people think they might be. Maybe we'll struggle a little bit. And that's sort of seemingly what's happened so far, although to be fair to them, it is still early. It is still preseason. We haven't actually seen them perform at their best, right? Give this team, they still got a ton of talent. But I actually don't think that they're an 11 seed team. I put them 11 because that's how they've been performing, but I definitely think that this team has the potential to still, perform 1 or 2 positions, 3 positions above where they currently are. Obviously, I think they're struggling a little bit right now. They got to find their footing, but you still got Octane, Gunless, Pristini and Looney. And again, I know our comments initially were hey, this team is overrated. They're not that top 5, top 16, but now I'm almost having the exact opposite conversation where I'm maybe this team's being a little bit underrated. Where I don't think that they're just like by far the worst team in the league, number 12 guarantee that some people are saying they are. Like, this is still a team where if it does go to LAN, they got some firepower. If they get hot, they can definitely make some noise. But as it currently stands, I always have question marks with the SMG line, how it was constructed, and there's seemingly like that seems to be one of the issues. And I don't know, I have them at my 11th position.
It's well, I have them at my 10th, and I think that saying 10 versus 9-8-7 isn't really saying a whole lot, because they are all actually quite close. Like for Seattle, for me, it's like they have two kind of top names from brands that didn't do well last year. We have Gunless, Octane. They could be they were like some of those top names from those teams, but they and they have like Pristini, which is was I wouldn't say the best player on his team, but a pretty good one nonetheless.
Yeah, very good.
So they definitely have like the potential. But I think one thing that's really holding me back is, I guess, they have a couple people on their team that team chemistry may be an issue.
Yeah,
That's
question
why
marks.
I'll just say that.
Yeah, there's some question marks there, right? Gunless, again, when he's on and he's locked in and he's focused, he can be one of the best flex supports, flex supports, Jesus Christ. One of the best flex players in the league. Nobody's denying that. But like, there's been instances in the past where he's maybe not locked in, or his teams, it doesn't work out, and for whatever reason he ends up being, getting dropped or moving on. There's definitely some question marks there that I think, again, if they hit, this team can shoot up the rankings. But as it currently stands, as far as I'm concerned, they haven't. So that's why they're at this 11th position. And again, there's just so much parity in the league. It's such a competitive year. You got to put somebody at 11. And the way it stands, that's just how I have it. And then the final team in sort of this bottom tier when we combine our rankings, and this one probably hurts me the most to put them in this tier, because I seriously think that they're a team that probably shouldn't be in the bottom tier list. It's one of those things where we just had to create tiers and we had to sort of try to do it the way we do it. But that's Paris. I actually had them at number 9, not number 10, but because of where Chris put them, that sort of, made them drop to our 10th position. I actually kind of like their roster. I like Fire a lot. Again, Fire was somebody who we spoke highly of when we talked about our top 5 prospects coming into the league. It was Hydra, Pred, Afro, Standy, and Fire was actually number 5. And I'm really excited to see him sort of get another chance. You pair him alongside somebody like Scraps, for instance, who I think, one, the content alone made that worth it, with the way that he exited London to go to Paris is very exciting in terms of the Battle of EU. I mean, I think he's also a really good player on top of that. Alakwa obviously had a rough year last year. No doubt about it, on one of the worst teams in the league. But I'm excited again. Let's put him on with arguably a better team, give him another chance, see if he can bounce back. So I'm excited to see how he performs. And then obviously our I don't want to say our friend, I don't know him at all, but he used to play for Ultras. We're Ultra podcast, so I'm happy that Classic got another shot, because when he was dropped, I think that was more of a, we're picking bands for the chemistry of the team as opposed to individually skilled, because a lot of people talk about that last year Ultra and sort of their like historic run that they kind of went on at the end of the year. They go, oh, what about Kleenex? What about Cammy, Methods? But don't sleep on Classic. Like, Classic definitely played his role. He had some clutch moments, and while he was inconsistent at times, the guy knows how to win, right? He's won I think he's won a major at every single Call of Duty. Definitely had some huge moments and some very key plays. So I think the roster's still pretty good. Even though I have them at number 10, they can make some noise.
You know what? I totally understand that. And I don't have a lot to add there. It's just the fact that, like, for me at least, Classic was one of the lower performers on Ultra, which was a mid-table team. Let's be honest.
To be fair, lower performers on the final starting roster, right? Not one of the, we had like 10 people in the Ultra last year, so yeah, definitely not one of the lower.
Yeah, I know. And for that, he gets to keep his job. Unlike everybody else who's gone actually just dropped. Yeah, but once again, Paris Legion has some new people and some people who weren't the best players on mid-level teams or low-level teams, and that's it. Like, they could do well, but I don't know enough about Fire and don't have enough data points for him.
Yeah, I like Fire. I think Fire is gonna be good, but you're right. Paris definitely. I think, again, we compare it to some of the other teams, I think they fall a little bit short. Now is our next tier, and this is the tier that we call Visa Hell, because this is the tier that these two teams, I think, currently are 8 and 9. I actually had London even lower, but they're very clearly rosters that are like missing some very key components because of like visa issues, and that's sort of holding them back. So currently at number 9 we have London, and number 8 is New York Excelsior. So for London, again, I actually was really surprised when this roster was constructed. I thought it was going to be Wuskins, Scraps, Nasty, and Dylan Codd, and then I guess some stuff happened behind the scenes and that whole thing blew up. I don't know what it was, and they ended up with going a different direction. And so while I don't like love their roster, It also doesn't help at all that they have Zero, who's currently again stuck in Europe, and then they just recently picked up, I think, in my opinion, one of the best prospects in the world right now, and that's Afro. And I'm very excited to see him finally get an opportunity to perform along London. And I think that he can also, again, improve that roster, but also hasn't got his visa situation figured out. And they pick a guy like Parasite up to sort of fill in for the meantime. Great opportunity for Parasite to really show what he's made of again. I know a lot of people have been wanting him back in the league for a long time, so he finally gets another opportunity to step up. It's just like I don't know, man. There's a lot of question marks here because of the visa issues. I think once everybody gets into the U.S. and everybody gets their roles set up, this team can again perform above where they're currently situated, especially when Africa gets in there. I'm really high on that kid. But until that happens, I don't know, man. I have some of the teams there that I think are a little bit more safer in terms of their potential ceiling.
And on the New York Subliners side, it's crazy how mixed they are. On one side we have Clayster, who's literally won tournaments and is one of the really big players, and Mac, who in my opinion, with Zuma, last year literally changed the New York Subliners around, added a whole nother dimension to them. But then we have another side of the coin, which is ASIM and Diamond Con, which are a little bit more unknown, and they have their bigger question marks around them.
Well,
if they get,
I was gonna say ASIM's not unknown, but we know ASIM's been in the scene for a long time. But I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of
him coming into this roster, probably wasn't the initial plan when you had Zuma, Hydra, Mac. I agree.
Yes, exactly. But if they can get Hydra, this is the team that I think will automatically jump a couple spots at least.
Oh, I totally.
So, that's easy hell right there.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is a team that, again, the initial roster was constructed to be Clayster, Mac, Hydra, and Zuma. And then unfortunate circumstances happen with Zuma, and he, gets injured and has to sort of take a step back. And we wish him nothing but the best and hope that he recovers and can return. Hydra gets stuck in visa hell and can't come over. That's 50% of your starting roster that is no longer with you, right? So you bring a guy like Asim in, who's, again, a good Canadian kid. I'm a big fan of Asim, but I don't know if he has the same ceiling that somebody like Hydra could have, for instance. And then you got to bring somebody like Diamond Con in, who, again, in this current meta, actually works because I think your flex player is still a main AR. But Diamond Cod's a main AR, right? He played main AR for Triumph. Another good Canadian kid. I'm actually a big fan of him. When we talked about potential ARs they could go after, he was 1 and 2 alongside Insight for the amateur scene. So I'm happy that he's finally getting a shot. But this is, again, where how is he going to fit his new role? Can he learn to be the flex player that a lot of people need him to be? And if it does end up going 3 SMG, which right now it looks like it won't, so that's good news for them. But I think that it's not the ideal roster construction that they'd want at the beginning of the year. But again, Hydra comes in. I think the number one prospect in this offseason could completely change this thing. I actually think this team could start pushing for seriously top 4, top 5 finishes with Hydra on that roster. I think that kid's that good. So at this point, they're sort of just waiting for the visa situation to be fixed.
I agree with that. But let's move on to our favorite team. I wish we could put them higher, but I think we have good reason why not putting them higher. Toronto Ultra.
Yeah, this is in the next tier. I think this is a dark horse tier where they're not. They're not one of the big threes, but I wouldn't be surprised if either of these teams take multiple 4th, 5th place finishes at sort of these tournaments.
They're not going to be 1, 2, 3 the whole time, but we could see them crack that 1 or 2 spot. Maybe once in a season or once or twice in a season. Toronto Ultra, yeah. So from my standpoint, here's what I'm going to say. The one really big thing about Toronto Ultra is they have good single-person pop-off potential, but my issue with them right now is that it's usually one person who's really performing, and the rest 2 are getting kind of carried by that person. We saw that in the Kickoff Classic with Bance. If it wasn't for Bance absolutely slapping, the storyline would be a lot different in my opinion. With the Minnesota Roker, they would have won more. It wouldn't have been a 3-2. It may have been a 3-1 or 3-0. So that is the same for me. We had points in late last season where Cameo was popping off and everybody was following him and trailing him, or Kleenex was popping off. But we never had this concerted effort where everybody was all together doing a good job at once. The second thing for them and why I place them where they are is because for the people who we're expecting to be top performers, for me, don't have enough data points yet. Biggest one is Kleenex. He seems like a great player. He has some great performances, but that really was only towards the last part of last season. I don't have enough data points for him. Same with Cammy.
Yeah, so I think there's some legitimate points there. I actually had them at number 6. With the way that we weighted it with our 2, they ended up being number 7 in our combined score. This is an interesting team. Yeah, the Bants. I still would have liked. How do I put this properly? This is like, yeah, I kind of agree with you. They play like a very interesting style, and you saw this during the classic where like Bant's like a pretty slow SMG where he almost like prefers to kind of play like an AR style, like a flex roll, and you saw that like he was frying, but if you also watch where his position was on the map, like he very clearly was like playing a frying role, right? He would like slay around the hill, he sort of played that like lurking SMG role, where some of the cleanups just like spreading around, hitting it like at multiple different angles. It's sort of the same with Cammy, who definitely like again like is an SMG, can play SMG, but also like kind of prefers that AR. So it's like an interesting fit. Bance had some really great moments last year. I just think he needs to work on his consistency. If Bance can be, now he's not going to be a consistent 1.75 KD, obviously not, but if Bance can like sort of hit that peak potential as he did at previous points last year consistently, I think this can be a much better team. They just need to sort of work on that consistency. And that's sort of what you're talking about, like one person pops off. It's not that like one person carries each other in individual maps. I just felt like at multiple different moments, people were, because they're inconsistent, like you're right, it would look like one person's pulling all the weight, but that's just because they're like locked on that particular game, and then the next game, like, you know, maybe it doesn't necessarily go their way. So this is going to be a very interesting roster. Cammy and Kleenex, if they're as good as they are at the end of the year, I think, again, this can be a top 5, top 6 team. But they're also going to have to show people that it wasn't just like, hey, we did really good at the end of Modern Warfare, that they can be a multiple title, multiple meta sort of star, and two kind of players you can build your team around. And you also got a guy like Method's in there, a ton of experience, been in the scene for, again, a long time. You know, the last 4v4 we saw was World War II when he was, again, one of the best players on that title. Hopefully the return to 4v4 also elevates him to be, again, one of the best players in this title. And a big shout out to Insight. I think Insight's a really good prospect too. So Method's is going to have some competition. Again, definitely his position to lose. I think he will be the starter, but if something doesn't happen, I do have a lot of faith in the backup and Insight. So I think that we have at least a good depth in that position as a whole.
Yeah. I also want to touch on one more thing, and that is, I think, how some people underestimate the power of having like a full team together for 2 years plus.
It's possible.
I know that a lot of people have been saying that with the lack of a general mix-up, it's a negative thing. But for me, it's something that can be positive. You know, these guys have built that natural chemistry, don't need to rebuild it. And I think this is something that's actually we saw in the Kickoff Classic. So I think that chemistry is something that really aids people in Respawn, because it's not as structured and not as strategically built out. So you guys have to kind of rely on just knowing each other, knowing how to build off of each other, and more of your instincts to get like build up kills and build up trades and whatnot. And when I was watching, we were watching that Kickoff Classic against the Roker, it was in those respawns that they are doing best, in the S&Ds and I guess a little control, which is a little more structured than pure respawn. But the S&Ds that they are struggling a little bit. So I think that's definitely something, a note that I want to keep an eye on too. Yeah,
and their S&D might have to improve again. It'll be a very interesting year for this team. I still would have loved to have seen Afro. I know there was rumors that he might end up in Toronto. I would have loved to have seen him join that team. I think that would have just fit him out perfectly. I would still let this team to at least have a potential substitute in case somebody like Cammy, Kleenex, or Bance maybe isn't working out. Therefore, you get another person with pace in there. Pace might be another issue for this team, but you're right. People, when this first year came out, they were putting them pretty at the bottom, and we were like, hey, this could be a good team. This is still a good team. Not the roster that I maybe would have initially anticipated, but I still have high hopes, man. And I really hope that Cammy and Kleenex continue to improve, and we get an even better version of them this year, which I think is possible.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. Next one, Roker.
Yeah.
We have that
Battle of the North.
Battle of the North, eh? You know what? For these two for me were really close. For me, it was just the fact that like Roker had like decent guys from traditionally better teams in last year. Like for me, Priesta and Major Maniac.
Big names.
I know for me, like I know those guys in my opinion were like, you hate to say weaker part of the Atlanta phase, but it's like they are, but they really aren't. Like you can't say that.
Yeah, I agree.
They're still just so good, but they're from that great team, and you can't. Accuracy and attach are just so good. They're gonna be a great S&D team as well. They're a really good team.
Great S&D team. I think you hit on the head there, especially with Priesta and Major Maniac as well. Just notorious S&D players. This is going to be a team that's really good at S&D, and again, once they get that respawn under wraps, can be scary. The only reason I had Ultra ahead of Minnesota, I actually had Minnesota at 7, Ultra at 6. One, bias. I'm Canadian. I'm an Ultra fan, so I have the right to potentially overrate the team that I cheer for. That's allowed. Two, again, fit a little bit. This team still concerns me a little bit because I think they're like a meta dependent team. The current meta is you probably run like your flex does run an AR, and so I think that actually works really well for this team. And in a meta like this, I actually think they could be like a top 4 team. Like I seriously think that this team can do damage because this meta and this game really fits their playstyle perfectly, right? The game's not going to change. It's a methodical game. It sort of insinuates, smarter players and more methodical players as opposed to just like pure pace, like maybe something like Modern Warfare was. But the meta currently does favor itself to like slower AR heavier teams. If this becomes a 3 SMG meta, I do think that this team will struggle a little bit more. And that's sort of what concerns me. So I actually think they could potentially be even better than 6 and 7 in this like first stage, like the first major. They're also a team that probably will do well in LAN if it ever gets there. My only concern is if the meta does end up changing and like patch notes come in and change certain weapons and it does become like a 3 SMG meta, as most Call of Duties tend to become faster and favor SMGs as the title progresses, then I think that they could maybe struggle a little bit more. I would love for this team to go out there and get like a Venom or a Standy or somebody like that just as a 5th, just in case, right? Like not with the sole purpose of like they're going to play, but just in case the meta does potentially swap, because that's the only weakness I see. Otherwise, 4 extremely talented players, they're going to be a fun team to watch.
That's pretty awesome. And for some reason there is fireworks outside. I think somebody liked your comment so much they're like fireworks right now.
That's fine.
So great to hear. Next up though, I believe we had LA Thieves.
Yeah, so I had them at 4, but they finished with our combined ranking at number 5. And this is like I think one of the hardest teams to read. So like we can hear your opinions first, but this is an interesting team.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Kenny, SMD God.
Yeah, also just again, Rookie of the Year in World War II, right? 100 Thieves, finalists, World Championships in Black Ops 4, like
the guy
really
has a
good.
history and he clapped so hard in SMD last year. Like this guy is a one-man army.
Yeah, it's good.
But TJ for me, I think he has something a little bit to prove from last year.
Yeah, but so I think I agree with you with Slasher and TJ definitely struggled maybe in like more in the online regular season, but bro, they turned up at champs, right? And Slasher and TJ are again legends in the scene, have been at it for a very long time, huge, names behind them, seen a lot of success in a lot of different titles. And I agree that if you look at just their online performances in Modern Warfare, you could have some question marks for all 3 of these people. But man, they were so good at champs. Like I seriously think that if they were the 4th best team at champs, and if Optic doesn't win that, if Envoy doesn't win that 1v1 versus TJ, like this seriously could have been a team that could have went to the finals, right? Like that they were getting really hot there and could have done some damage. So on one hand, I agree with you, and 10th coming in there as a 4th. I actually kind of like Draza too. I think Draza's really good. So I think between one of those 2 players, you're gonna get somebody good. This is a team that might struggle early on online, but dude, if that major's on LAN, this could be a team that could push into that top tier team of like the big 3. Like I don't know, this is a hard team to rank, man. This is
like I said, we're getting to that area where it's like they're not very obviously the best, but they're like still really darn good. But the thing is that like for me, I know they did so well in champs, but at the same time, like you got to think about the amount of games you play in champs versus the amount of games you play regular season is a lot different.
It's true, but also like nobody cares about the regular season in relation to champs, right? Like everybody remembers champs. Not as many people remember like your games in April. I agree with you. This is one of those teams I think if you put them at like 4, you're gonna look dumb until the major when they pop off, and if you put them at like 7th, you're going to look like a genius during the online sections in the early stages. But then when it comes to the very end, they're going to pop off. You're going to be like, oh, how could I have ever thought that they would be like the 8th best team? It's a hard team to rank. But again, if this team gets going, there's no doubt in my mind that this could easily upset Optic or Dow somewhere down the lines. I just, just again, you're right. The Modern Warfare performances and how much of this season is going to be played online, if any at all on LAN, is what concerns me.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. So next one, Florida Mutineers. Or do we have Florida next?
Yeah, Florida at 4. Yeah, Florida showing up.
Tell me about that, Spencer.
I had them at 5. Florida, just a good team, honestly. They Skies, I think, is one of the best ARs in the league. I'm a huge Skies fan. I think he's extremely talented. Awakening came in there again, one of the best prospects. Completely turned that season around. Obviously, there's some stuff like surrounding this team, and again, we wished the friends and family, nothing but the best, and hope that whole organization can sort of move past the unfortunate circumstances that were a part of this offseason. But again, Slack came in there under a really shitty circumstance. And I think for the most part has really made the most out of, I don't want to call it an opportunity, but you know what I mean? Made the most out of the ability to get to play in that starting lineup. And he's looked really good. And then they got a young kid under Neptune. And again, we were talking about this earlier in this offseason. Sorry, not this offseason, when the game was out, but the league hadn't started yet, right? So like November range when the Challengers Cups were going on. Yeah. I was like, dude, Neptune's really good. Like somebody who I didn't have like a lot of, I knew he was coming from Halo, but I obviously hadn't seen him really play. But in those first few Challengers Cups, I was like, bro, Neptune is like extremely talented. And like, I was like, hopefully maybe Insight can start a team with him. I was like trying to was like, man, this kid's going to make some noise. And then Florida gave him a shot and he's really showed up. So I think that this is just a really good team. It's got a good mix of like veterans and like, I don't want to call Sky's a veteran. He's so young, but he's done it. But Slack for sure is a veteran, right? And you combine him and kind of Skies, Skies is pretty young, with younger, more up-and-coming players like Awakening and Neptune. They got a good mix, and that's always how successful teams are built, with a mix of veterans and young up-and-coming prospects. The roles fit. I think they're meta-proof, right? I could see any sort of meta of them working out. I like this team a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I really don't have anything to add there. But so I want to move on to this. So that ends our bracket. That's kind of that mid-table bracket.
The dark horse, yeah. Florida, LA, Minnesota, Ultra. I don't expect them to win every tournament. I don't expect them to be top 2 every tournament. But meta hits them. They get hot. They can make that sort of push, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But these are the big
last three are sauciest ones, and I think these are their own bracket because we're expecting them to really be top 3 the whole time, like maybe dropping a 4th once or twice, but really be in the top 3 the whole time. The first is Optic. Now, for me, Optic is a great team. Like, let's not get that wrong. They are an amazing team. The one thing for me is why I didn't put them higher is because I think they have guys who did great for the first part of 2020 season, but they kind of dropped off. Like Formal Envoy, they're doing great, but they just kind of like toned down a little bit, and they weren't as good. Let me just finish. This is like, it's harsh wording, but I'm making comparisons to the top 2 tiers in the league. They like dropped off compared to they looked a little more beatable. Let's just say that.
Okay, yeah.
They looked unbeatable at the start. They looked a little more beatable in terms of that. And then Dashi, came from Optic Gaming. Optic Gaming, I forgot which Optic Gaming in Los Angeles last year.
Yeah.
And that was a mid-table team at best.
Well, yeah. So I agree that they dropped off a little bit in relation to like the big 2 of Atlanta and Dallas. I wouldn't say they dropped off. Like Envoy was one of the best players all of last year and came in as being one of the best players.
Yeah, that's what I meant. They look more people.
Yeah, and this is just the team. The problem is I feel like with Scump and Formal, right? They're just absolute legends of the scene. They've done it all, right? They've won champs. At this point, it's the competitive drive that keeps going. Like I could see this being the team that like starts off hot, does really well, and then kind of like, I don't want to say coast is the right word, but like, as the season progresses, right, you know that you need to save your energy. Like LeBron James doesn't go 110% every single night, right? He's got to save it for the playoffs so he can carry his team to victory. I feel like that's the one maybe downside of this team was like, how long can they really stay truly locked in? But man, this is a team where if this thing goes on LAN and they get locked in, they get hot, like they can absolutely beat one of the top 2 teams. Dashi, again, yeah, a rough year with Optic Gaming, but there was some stuff behind the scenes there. What Dashi saw in Black Ops 4, like, absolutely cracked out. Good Canadian kid as well. Great at S&D. Envoy is one of the best. I think he's the highest S&D KD in the league last year. Plus, you combine those 2 with Scump and Formal, man, it's going to be a fun team to watch. Yeah. It's going to be a great team. The only reason they're not 1 and 2, personally, is just because I think 1 and 2 are really good. Like, it's nothing against them. It's just, like, they're the big 3 for a reason. They can compete with 1 and 2. Somebody's going to be 3rd out of the big 3, and I just think it's Optic. And I just, again, think with online and they have more of a likelihood to like maybe like give it 95% one of these games instead of 100%. Yeah. And that's why. But dude, I'm very excited to see this Optic team perform.
I am stoked. Okay, last one, Atlanta FaZe Dallas Empire. We had this switched. So I had Dallas Empire first, Atlanta FaZe second. Spence had Atlanta FaZe first, Dallas Empire second. Guys, when it's first and second, it's not like first or second and then a big jump in first. These teams are too close, and like honestly, this just for me and our differences comes down to principle. Like for me, Atlanta FaZe, it's a great team, and I think they even just got better because once again, once again, to me, like, let's not be wrong. Major Maniac and Priesta, they're freaking great. They're really good. But if I'd say if there was a weak point to the team, it was them compared to the rest of the team. Like, we're talking about stars versus superstars here. So, like, don't get me wrong, they're still amazing. Atlanta FaZe literally just dropped their 2 lower guys and got better.
Yeah,
they just got better. Like, Celium, holy crap. Celium, this guy, okay, Celium to me, he's the most consistent player, one of the most consistent players I've ever seen. Simp, he's that really good consistent player that can get crazy pop-offs.
Yeah.
So they have like this high level that they always perform at, and then a high ceiling.
Well, that's why I put him first. I mean, you're hupping them up. You put him second. Like, I agree with you. I agree with everything you're saying. I think that this is a team that just, I understand why you'd put Dallas first, because they just won. They're the defending champions, right? Like, how do you not put them first? They're the defending champions. They have one of the greatest, if not the probably the greatest player of all time in Crim 6. You combine them with really cracked out up-and-coming young, not even up-and-coming anymore. They've arrived, right? MVP Shotzi, and then put him alongside a really great SMG and Hook, and then again an S&D god and a really well-rounded player in Illy and a good Canadian kid. Shout out to Illy. I can understand why you'd have them first. I can't get over the talent on paper. And again, Atlanta, hey, people are looking at me. Spencer, Atlanta literally just lost to Florida. Like, I'm like, fair enough. I mean, again, CDL preseason match. I don't want to put my entire stock into that, but dude, I can't get over the talent. They have 3 of the MVP candidates nominees last year on one team, and the only one who wasn't nominated is a Beezy, who's like, it's arguably their best player. Like, he probably isn't, but he might be. Like, this whole team is stacked from top to bottom. They're meta-proof. Every meta they're good. Every situation they're good. And maybe they aren't lighting the world on fire like right now, but again, when push comes to shove, I have faith that they'll figure it out. There's just too much talent.
What I mean by pop-off potential is that, like, they're a little bit inconsistent. Like, let's say, like,
but RCDs might fix that.
Ceiling, like, look at this. Let's say this is that ceiling where, you know, if you hit it, you're winning every time. They're operating like at a very high level, and they can pop off and hit that ceiling. Yeah. For me, Dallas Empire, they don't like, they're less inconsistent. Like, they don't have that massive pop off, but they're just consistently at a higher level.
So here's we're debating the 2 championship teams last year, right? The winners and the finalists. My last point that I'm going to say is, so on paper, I still think they have the better roster, but 2, if LAN is a thing, and which some people are rumored it to be, I have more faith on this Atlanta team, who is built from the E-United core that won Black Ops 4 championships on LAN, than I potentially do on the Dallas Empire, who looked less than a championship team. Still good, but weren't nearly as dominant at the beginning of Modern Warfare when it was on LAN. And I know there's other excuses like team chemistry, young players getting in, right? I'm not one of those people who says it doesn't count because it's online. But if it does go to LAN, I have a little bit more faith on the E-United core that won it on LAN as opposed to Dallas Empire who won it online. And again, it's the top 2 teams, right? I still think that Dallas is going to go to LAN and fucking do fine. I'm not one of those people, but I like Atlanta more. Atlanta's my number 1 team. I'll die this entire year on that hill.
Imagine Crimsex talking smack at you in person. I love to talk smack. He has an opinion about everything.
Yeah, you could say that again. So, I mean, he definitely gave it to us on Twitter that one day. So, I mean, I don't know how that worked out in his perspective, but a bunch of other people too. Yeah, facts. So yeah, that's our list. That's our list.
Yeah, guys,
Atlanta, Dallas, Optic, Florida, LA, Minnesota, Ultra, New York, London, Paris, Seattle, and LAG. There it is.
If you guys agree, like this. If you disagree, like it still, but also tell us why you disagree.
Yeah, give us your opinions. Again, there's no, I think, wrong answers. Every team's good here. I could see a lot of these teams being high. I could see a lot of these teams being lower than where we put them. I think the big 3, most of the people agree with the big 3, but after that, shit. And even those big 3, I've seen them in a multitude of different orders. So definitely tell us what you think we got wrong. Tell us what you think we got right, and give us your opinions. You know what I mean? Of Dallas and Atlanta, who do you have at number 1? Is it Optic? It might be. Is it Ultra? Smart man. It's good. It should
probably
be.
Not good.
probably not that good either, but we love to see it anyways. All right, thank you so much for watching, guys. As always, enjoy.